So first of all, I want to thank Raphael Ribot and his staff for organizing this workshop, as it is a very important and actual topic we need to engage with. Artificial intelligence is no science fiction, as it was said. It is already present in our everyday life. What is absolutely sure is that we were ignorant maybe yesterday, but we cannot pretend anymore to be ignorant today, after the very intense and important debate we had during these 2 days. We now both have the difficult task to draw up conclusions, and because these 2 days were so intense, I thought we could have needed maybe some artificial intelligence system to help us summarize all the information we gathered. But fortunately, I have much better than artificial intelligence to help me in this task, and I'm very glad first to give the floor now to Professor Cortés, who will help us draw up these conclusions.
Well, thank you for the confidence in doing this task. It has been very fruitful 2 days here, and I really learned a lot. It was really, really intense. For me, because as I said yesterday, I'm just a normal professor. I have my students, my research teams, and well, have almost no contact with legal institutions. So first, some acknowledgements. Here, there's people, of course, all the speakers, but there are some among the speakers that helped me to draw these conclusions, and also some institutions, and I really, so they produce Access Now and FRA produce documents that are very, very interesting, and I must confess that I was unable to read the document that Madame Mattioli gave us today. It was really enlightening, and was a lot of work there, and also the exposition was really magnificent. So let us go. So we have 1 days here working, and we try many ways to explain from the both sides, from the more technical side, but mostly from your side, what is the issue with AI. And even if we try and try, we won't go out with a single answer. But yeah, that's our quest. For us is the trying. But there is no such thing like a free lunch, just to say my grandfather. So let us go there, and some statements. So AI is not an independent entity. So most of you address to AI as something that exists and has intentions and have desires and maybe political will, but it is not. It's just an academic creation. But what is clear that it has economic value, and therefore it impacts on society. But this technology is almost unregulated. As I said yesterday, mostly because it's built on the roots brought for war technology that was unregulated because of its own nature. And this technology is used on purpose. So humans have intentions by using this technology. One of those intentions is to make money. And they do not respect any thing because there is no regulation, so they don't care. And there is no self-regulation, so this free land to do things, and that's an issue. But there's individuals, companies, and governments. So there are governments that are using the AI technology for their own purposes, and you had some examples of that. So having human oversight is not an option, and it's an EU principle if it affects on living beings and or the environment. And that should be clear. So we cannot put the man outside the loop of the decision making. That's an awful idea, and there is a lot of things. Yesterday, you saw in my slides an example of what it means to be supervised, controlled, automated, and autonomous. When you automatize things, then the thing gets out of context. There is no intelligence at all. There is simple rules to be applied as the landmine. So forget about automatization. use artificial intelligence as an extension of human capabilities, but always the man in the loop. So there are other artifacts that, well, they don't need to be always controlled, but they need some control. But there are those artifacts that do things, small things for us, like your spammer. You don't need to have someone reading on your spammer because it's meant to take you out some material that you don't like in your email, right? But then those artifacts have to be supervised, and how close, how many agents have to be involved, how often you will be just supervising that. So this seems to be something that is very serious for us, but we've been writing this with Atia this morning, and we found a Twitter by Johanna Bryson that is one of the leading persons in ethics in AI, and she has more or less the same statements in her Twitter. It was separated ideas that came together, and I have to give credit to her just because it was very serendipity that we get to the same point, and I'm very happy to be more or less aligned with her thoughts. So we have other things. We have GAFAMA. That stands for Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, and Alibaba. Don't forget that China is 30% of all market, so they have to have a word. So, and all, as we said yesterday, they are trying to do some kind of ethic policies that, yeah, we have to praise them, but human rights impact has to be assessed. And who will put in the bell to that cat? Those are tigers, not small cats. And someone has to be there to put the bell, because we need to hear that they are approaching all the time. But it's not only about ethics. We have to talk about also legal, socioeconomic, gender, and cultural aspects. And in the LSEC elements that is promoted by European Union, we forgot about gender. We cannot go ahead with taking out half of the population, half of the talent. We need to be there in the first line. And we are forgetting always that in our discourse. So once we are worried about those aspects, we have to ask ourselves why those companies, big companies, attempt to modify our LSEC values. If we do believe that Europe has these values, that we want to fight for them, why we are letting that people to modify the way we behave. So one of the most striking things is that Netflix is rewriting the history. No one will read again the history of Cortés, but they go to Netflix to see the new series about Cortés or the Medici or whatever you like. They are rewriting history. Without burning books, people is not reading books, and we know what does it mean 451 Fahrenheit degrees. And this modification is in their own benefit. It's an economic benefit. And well, in the liberal, ultra-liberal capitalist world, maybe fair, but we don't believe in that. And we are confronted with this idea of why we have to accept them. So we have dilemmas, values, and videotapes. It came from a famous film. You may watch it. So we have freedom and dependence, right? You have freedom of choice, or not using internet services, or depending to them. So you have free choice versus machine-based recommendation. And it's your choice, but maybe it should be regulated. Security and privacy. If you want to be more private, then your security will be maybe flavor, and yeah, you have to work with that. Safety and efficiency. Explainability against performance. So those that defend that deep learning is the answer, they are looking for performance. It's of course faster, but you will never get a reasonable explanation about the results of those machines. You have accountability and confidentiality, prosperity and sustainability. And then all this creates an ethical overload. You cannot have it all. And if you pretend, you have to pay the price. So some well, ideas for the work of you. Please do not reinvent the whole legal framework. We have, as we saw in the session for lunch, that Europe has clearly a legacy in framework that we have to explore and use. But you should be aware that technology that is both EU ELSEC compliant and made at home will be more expensive than the one that's coming from China or the States. And we want citizens be aware of that and pay the price, because that means that the data will be inside our region. We will control the servers. We will control the persistency of the data. We will control the privacy of the data, the anonymization of the data, and when necessary, the data will be erased, and we will exercise, if needed, our rights to be forgotten in internet. So that's an issue. Get the appropriate technology assessment to understand each AI-based service on use. So there is no two pieces of software that are identical. They may be designed for two different teams with the same specification, but you have to be sure that they are compliant with the specification. So within Europe, you have the talent to do that. The universities have plenty of researchers. European Union is putting a lot of money, both in research and in education of talent, but we are unable to retain that talent. And also, technical education is a must. Maybe we have to get an idea that it should be included among the rights of education, to have the appropriate technical and critical education for the future generations, and maybe, well, complement the people already here. So let me step down from my professional stand, and let's go to the teacher profile, and I have some homework for you. So about transparency. So you need to supervise transparency certificates to all AI-based services in use. Someone has to certify that those services that are used, for example, in the public administration, are transparent. Even if you give something very easy, 3 colors, green, yellow, and red. So, I mean, I can read all the legal documents behind a service, but better is someone in the state that reads the document and says, this is correct for you. Behaves inside our legacy, so it has a green seal. And then for the ombudsman is to supervise that they keep in that seal. The other thing is, what about you give to some services a red flag, and people in your environment is using a red flagged service? Should be admissible? Well, you should have to think about. And of course, you have to demand the EU Parliament and or the Council of Europe a law and normative to have these transparency certificates installed elsewhere in Europe. The other thing that we heard from David Sibio is that all software produced and used in the public administration has to be available for supervised inspection. I agree that you cannot give that software to anyone to supervise, but maybe through the mediation of your services, it can be inspected by third parties under all the certificates of non-disclosure. But someone has to read it, apart from the producer. So we have to remember that if the software was paid by the government, it's our property, citizens' property. If you buy to someone else, you are paying that service with public money. So they should be ready, eager to show the software for you. About responsibility. So only support apps that unfair, bias-free. I know that is very fuzzy term. But well, if you start thinking that there should be a sandbox or kind of regulation for the life cycle of the software, it can be true. Not now, but yeah, in the near future. And I believe that you have to supervise all algorithms, use it in public administration, use it to aggregate personal data to make decisions in at least the following fields: healthcare, human autonomy, freedom of movement, liberty, security, justice, equality before courts. We are talking already about Compass. Privacy and data protection, equality, non-discrimination, and political participation. Well, the unfortunate example of Cambridge Analytica in the States and other places in Europe, for example in Spain, are examples of how you can use those algorithms to modify person's opinion in voting, electing representatives. And education and environment. This idea of letting Google to provide services to schools, the Google Suite, I believe that is just an aberration. Kids do not need that. We arrived to this point of civilization. All of you, most of you, never use Google Suite when you attend school. The most you had was a small calculator. Why kids now need to have all those services and be profiled? You don't need it. You need to develop a critical thinking and then use the technology, but when you have the means. So we are here because we create the technology, but we don't need the technology to be used just by default. More about responsibility. Avoid the use in the public administration the inappropriate surveillance services and or inadvertently harvest personal data. We have to avoid it. But of course, there is the law enforcement agencies that need those techniques in a given moment to give us security. So it's a big discussion. The state has to be prepared to have an in-depth discussion about this, because you need to have those services. You need to use it in a given circumstance with a targeted person during a period of time that has been agreed within the ministries of interior and blah, blah, blah. But you need to have them. The others are using it. In the moment that is needed, you have to use it, and then take it apart. And then you have to find how to allocate legal responsibility of the use of those services that are making that kind of use, inappropriate use of the personal data. Regarding accountability, we have to certificate automated decision-making, and we have to avoid the accountability gap. So there is two main things. We already heard the previous speaker telling about the trust. So a way to build trust is to be accountable. So it's in the human shoulder to answer correctly to the use of data and decision-making. The machines won't do it. You have to have someone that you can ask directly why this machine is performing like that. And also, you have to create a methodology that allows responsibility in the design of the thing, because that will imply the intention that was programmed in the system. So once you have a machine that is able to answer and can be audited and is accountable, we'll use that machine to answer in front of a jury? It's a question, right? And you can do it. So there are machines that are able to make arguments and argue like a lawyer. And if they have enough evidence, they may be used. Are we prepared to do that? Because we are prepared to go into a chirurgical intervention by using a robot. So why not? As a matter of fact, most of you fly in airplanes that mostly are flight by 3 computers. The pilot is there most of the time, but who is doing most of the calculation is the system of 3 computers. So we are confident in machines that make critical decisions. Of course, the pilot is always there to supervise the loop. And the last one is very tough. Huh? All produced data by citizens within a city, region, or a country belong to the producers. So the public administrations have to assure that producers can obtain direct benefit. Mexico City, authorities are fighting against Google and other companies to get all the data produced by the use of Waze and Google Maps to improve their infrastructures. Why not? It's your data, citizens' data. You are giving them permission to operate. They are using your infrastructure of telecommunication. So the data is yours, so you have to at least have a share. And the share will go in the benefit of the citizen. So I do believe that we have to regulate the life cycle of AI-based services. And I put here an example that is very easy to understand. If you want to create a pharmaceutical pill for any disease, you have the drug discovery that takes like 6 years between finding the targets, designing the molecular and that. But then you have clinical trials that are 6 years. So we don't need technology to change every year because we need first to experiment, and society has to be sure that that technology is giving the appropriate results and it's not harming our rights. So you need to regulate the time of delivery in the market with the appropriate test. We do with pharmaceutical companies. Why we cannot do it with software companies or other telecoms? I don't know if AI is the problem or the solution, right? But it's a scientific area. We are trying to find out which are the mechanisms that are behind what we call animal intelligence. We want to reproduce it into a machine. And one of the things that we are aiming is to get some kind of really artificial intelligence that is different from human intelligence, and we start a dialogue with that intelligence to solve problems with another view. But we don't want to replace humans. It's not the idea. I believe that it's a perverse idea that we create machines, any kind of machines, to replace some work placement of any citizen. If you want to replace a citizen in a line of work, you have to provide means for that people to live in an appropriate way and pay taxes for doing that. So this is a quote from A Winter's Tale, Charles Dickens. And yeah, we are always talking about mankind, and we want to improve mankind's life, and we don't want to use technology to make them to live in a virtual reality where they smile and the non-smiling people is the ones that are controlling the thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. So you had a long list of homework, and I'm not sure that all these homeworks addresses to the ombudsman, but part of them surely address the ombudsman community. Ombudsmen have an important role to play in ensuring that public services comply with human rights standards when they implement artificial intelligence systems. We heard during these 2 days that we don't need to wait until there will be a new legal framework. We can already act upon the current international framework of human rights that is fully applicable to this new reality and must be complied with by public and private operators of artificial intelligence. But at the same time, this framework requires updates and adaptations to face the challenges posed by the digitalization of society. It must be adapted at national and at international scales based on the principles of accountability, transparency, equity, and security. Yesterday, some activists of civil society called ombudsmen to action And today, representatives of international bodies urged us to take up our role in this area. There is a challenge for IOI to take up the responsibility to undertake diplomatic actions towards European Union, and it's a role for IOI Europe. So I look up to my colleagues of the outgoing board and on the ongoing boards that there is really a momentum now to have a first step as IOI Europe to contribute to the public consultation on artificial intelligence and data strategy of the European Commission. There is also another challenge for us as ombudsman institutions, because artificial intelligence is not bad by itself. And to conclude on an optimistic point, I want to refer to what Geraldine told us this afternoon. We can make use of artificial intelligence in our own offices in order to promote and protect human rights on a more efficient way. But therefore, we need to overcome the knowledge gap in our own offices and manage to hire the necessary skills or to develop relations with expert networks to support our work in this area. And last but not least, I think we really need to use the Venice principles in order to get in all our offices these own initiative powers, because more than any other area, it will be very important that we can act upon initiative to check if these new artificial intelligence systems are compliant with human rights, because the citizens don't even know most of the time that the decision is made upon artificial intelligence systems. So really need to use the Venice principles in order to get this own initiative powers. So I think we have our own homework list to go back in our offices, we are less ignorant than we were 2 days ago. So thank you once again to Raphael for organizing this workshop, and have all of you a safe trip home, and give the floor now back to our host.